Hello, darling Ruby, and very welcome to the Dirty 30 Chats podcast. How are you today?
Oh, I'm so good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for this conversation. I've been looking forward to it all week.
Me too. My absolute pleasure. I'm so excited. I know there's going to be so much goodness to come out of this chat. So I thought let's just start with a very quick intro as to the work that you do as a somatic sexologist.
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially, I work with women to support them to reclaim their pleasure, reconnect to their body, and kind of come into contact with their most authentic sexual and erotic expression. And through all of these different things, it's like essentially supporting women to come back to themselves and to come into contact with their most authentic expression as erotic beings, and to be able to create really beautiful intimate lives, to have great sex, to feel connected to the truth of who they are. And through somatic sexology, it's not like traditional talk therapy. It's very much, when we look at somatic sexology, it is supporting women to feel, to learn how to feel, to come into their body and to heal their relationship with sex, with their relationship with their body, through feeling in the body and experiencing things within the body. So I guess it's a really powerful way to approach sex and our sexual healing journey, through the body, because obviously sex is such a body-based activity and such a body-based experience. So when we can heal through the body and learn how to feel more within our body and within our systems, it really translates into learning how to have great sex and create great sexual experiences.
Wow, I love that. I feel like a huge thing that many people, not just women, probably are lacking of that level of connection. So excited to dive deeper into that. I'm curious as to how you found this career path in your own journey and what that's meant or what changes you felt ever since connecting to this path.
Yeah, so for me, I was always quite sexually curious when I was a teenager. I was quite sexually active. I was quite promiscuous. I was a bit of a wild child in my teen years. I was very lucky that I grew up in a house with hippie parents who were really sex positive, particularly for their time. They were super sex positive and really supportive of my sibling and myself to, you know, having sexual experiences in a really safe, consensual, and pleasurable way. So we were taught about consent, we were taught about pleasure, we were taught about sex in a really positive light. So for me, that curiosity was never shamed. So I always had this kind of sexual curiosity almost like nurtured within me. Thank God for hippie parents, right?
Really? It's
And
like
it was
unheard of.
yeah, and it was like home was so supportive of that part of myself. It was very much in school and through, peers, that there was that sexual shame kind of crept in, and there was those parts of myself that I felt I had to repress and hide. But after school, when I was sort of 19, I started exploring. I had this like seed of curiosity, and this I'd had sexual experiences as a teen, going, wow, this is something that I'm really curious about. I'd always been incredibly curious about, relationships and connection and intimacy. It was always this thing that kind of called me and that excited me. I've always been a bit of a lover girl, hopeless romantic, like just love and love intimacy, love connection, and reading about it and listening to music about it. And it's always been, and seeing art about it, it's very much like one of my favorite things in the world. So it felt very natural to start to pursue this thread in my life, and that looked like going to sort of like embodiment workshops, tantra workshops, starting to explore neo tantra, sacred sexuality, as sort of a 19-20-year-old. And that was very much like the beginning of this whole journey for me, and working in this space. And as I was sort of exploring neo tantra and sacred sexuality and embodiment as a very young woman, there was a part of me that felt as though there was something missing to these teachings. There was a sense of groundedness and sort of oftentimes I felt as though the holistic approach was often missing in these spaces. And I really wanted to experience the other side of things, that being, the scientific. I wanted to explore the science behind sex and the science behind arousal and the science and kind of reasoning behind these things, as well as the spiritual and the esoteric and the energetic. And through my journey in these spaces, I feel as though I've really found a beautiful balance between the energetic, the spiritual, the esoteric, and the grounded scientific, approach to sex and understanding relating. And that is very much my approach, is like an integrated methodology that includes all of these aspects and approaches, supporting people through sex, with sex, through a really, holistic approach.
I love that. And so when you start diving into this work on a more, career path, how do you start integrating that modality that you could feel was lacking? Like, was that through your own studies? Was that more from your own personal experience? Like, how does that start coming into play in practice?
Yeah, so it was through my studies. I think it was through my own personal experiences initially, feeling as though there was aspects of myself that I wanted to dive deeper on. For example, say like I had my experience of sexual desire. I wanted to understand it more from a scientific approach. So I started, through my studies in somatic sexology. It was like, oh, this is amazing. I'm feeling all of this desire and this erotic energy, which is explained through, say, neo-tantric teachings or tantric teachings. And I can also understand it from this other perspective through somatic sexology teachings and through sexological teachings. And it's so what I discovered as I was, throughout all my different studies and experiences, was that having this holistic approach allowed me to, support clients to understand our sexuality and our sexual expression in a nuanced way, because our sexuality and sexual expression is a nuanced thing. It's not just this, one size fits all expression and experience for people, and having these different ways to understand it and essentially experience it in the deepest way possible, because that's what my work is about, is helping people to like experience the deepest aspects of their sexual expression and the deepest pleasure that they can have access to. And taking a holistic approach to this enables people to access that.
That's amazing. What would you say in your many years of practice now as a somatic sexologist, especially focusing in women, just for the sake of the podcast audience? That's usually who I'm tailoring to. What would you say women come into your practice and come to you with as common topics, common things that they want to work on?
So I only work with women as well. So I feel like, speaking to all of the women out there, I would say the number one, or I'll say the top three things that I work with women on is, low sexual desire and navigating low sexual desire. What I work with a lot of women on is women who have had a really high sexual desire and high libido in their early 20s, and say in their late teens, early 20s. Perhaps they've come off or gone on hormonal contraception, they've had a relationship breakdown, there's been some event in their life, or even, they've had a baby, or they've had, a really stressful experience at work, or taken on a new job or career path, and something has shifted in their life, and this identity that they had in their early 20s, or whatever time of their life it was, has shifted, and their libido and their sexual desire has dropped. And really supporting women to recreate a new relationship with their sexual desire, understand their sexual desire, understand how it works for them, understand how to cultivate it, both on that, like I was talking about, that energetic kind of more spiritual level, that deep soulful level of, understanding our sexual energy, but then also on that really practical level of like, this is how your libido works, your sexual desire works. And very much working with women on understanding the nuance of their sexual desire. The other thing I work with a lot of women on is, their embodiment, and that being, learning how to be present in their body. For so many women, stress is a huge factor in their life. Stress, pressure, um, even just like the fast paced nature and the sort of screens based nature of our lives now, really translates to a lot of women living in their head and really struggling to be present in their body. So when we work with somatic sexology, it's obviously, and somatic sexological teachings, it's very much teaching people how to feel and how to be in the body. So working with women on that. And then the other big thing that I work with women on is essentially like reconnecting to their body and reconnecting to the truth of their body, because they've spent so long in a space of performing, pretending, faking orgasms, tolerating pain and discomfort, and really working with women to like recreate their relationship with their body and the sensations with their body, which ties into that embodiment piece too. So I'd say those are the three biggest things that I work with women on. Mm.
Fascinating. I guess, especially in your own sexual life, in whatever way that looks like, the mind body connection is so strong. And like you were saying, the moment, you're stressed in your head, whatever is going on mentally or in that nervous system, mental system, has such an impact on our sexual health. And I think that's something that most people have experienced. When one is relaxed, what happens then? When one is in their head, what happens then? And I guess, in a way, let's say people in their 30s, even 40s, I guess, depending on what age their parents had when they were born, we're kind of like that woke generation that's almost like for the first time in history, right? We're tapping into this level of consciousness in relationships, in our life, in our sexuality, in all of these areas where we haven't been taught this. Maybe if you had, hippie parents or people in your life that were like more pro this, then you were really lucky to have that level of education. But, for the first time, we're having sex education as a TV show, and all these topics come to surface. And, as millennials, in our case, the learnings we've received are probably from movies, porn, magazines, like, external influences that have nothing to do with the real life. So it's like, how do we debunk all of those systems that we've believed in to now really tap into what our body really feels, which is not that easy. But I guess that's exactly the work you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's one of those things where we're almost, there's a pioneering happening in this space from, women in that generation and people in that generation, right? And we are in a stage now where we actually have so much information on how to begin to explore our bodies and how to actually like come into connection with these authentic parts of our sexual expression. And that in itself can feel quite paralyzing as well, which I think is an interesting aspect to this conversation of like, we have so much opportunity available to us, but also that's a really overwhelming thing also. And it's like, where do I actually begin? And I just want to say to anyone listening to this to any woman listening to this who's like, oh my God, I resonate with everything that you're saying, all of the challenges that you've, expressed. And I feel like I should be able to, know and understand these parts of myself. I just want to say, like, it's okay that you don't, we haven't been taught these things. And, just really being gentle with yourself and moving slowly with yourself and starting with small, simple, practical things, I think is, where I always suggest to begin is like just, start by learning how to reconnect with your body in a really gentle way, and not being hard on yourself if you're sort of in your, 30s and 40s and this is the first time you're even having a conversation like this.
Absolutely. There's so much stigma, right, around the word sex in itself. And often, obviously, depending on what your support system looks like, those conversations might not even be happening now. And that is okay. I guess that's when the work you're doing, I feel like it's really empowering as an outsider when you come across like your profile, for example, in socials, in the sense of there's that level of confidence and trust in what you're offering, but without that
Mm.
overwhelming feeling of like, oh, this is how I need to look and be and act, which often happens with certain people that offer maybe a similar service, but it's way more, not saying performed, but maybe there's a bit of a profile. which can be daunting to even approach and be like, hey, I need your services, you know, and even that step might feel very daunting in itself.
Yeah, and I think you touch on a really great point of there's almost these expectations on how our sexual expression should look. And, you know, I think this is something that I talk about often in my work, and something I really encourage in my clients is that there is no right or wrong way for your sexual expression to look, your authentic sexual expression to look. And I speak about the term authentic sexual expression, and it can be a little bit ambiguous. So I'll give you an analogy. Essentially, our authentic sexual expression is like our own personal style of sex. So it's like, you know, when you go to your wardrobe and you feel as though you've finally cultivated your perfect personal style, and everything in your wardrobe, or you put on an outfit and you're like, oh, this feels like me, and I feel comfortable and I feel relaxed in it, and it doesn't matter what the outside trends are doing. I love wearing this thing and it feels really comfortable, and I feel really confident and solid in what I'm wearing. And you go out and you have a great day and you feel really beautiful and comfortable in your skin because what you're wearing is your own style and it feels like you. You know, the alternative is when you've perhaps bought something and you're like, you put on this piece of clothing and it's trendy and you think you should be wearing it because, you know, that's what everyone else is wearing or what everyone else has told you to wear, and you put it on and it feels like it doesn't quite fit and it sort of grabs a bit tightly, or the fabric feels a bit scratchy, and you kind of wear it all day and you just feel really uncomfortable in it. This is essentially like our authentic sexual expression is the dress that you love to wear that feels like you and that you feel comfortable and relaxed and confident in. And the performing, pretending is the uncomfy, trendy dress that you think you should be wearing that actually isn't you. And so, what I think is really important is, despite what we are told sex should look like, sexual expression should look like, despite what, you know, what clothes are trending, so to speak, it's so important to come into contact with your own, you know, authentic expression, that being your own style of sex. And when we do, there's this embodied confidence that we experience. And it doesn't matter what the world is telling us we should be doing. It's like, no, I actually know myself and I know what my sexual expression is. And that can be translated with different partners really easily. So I think that that analogy can be helpful when I talk about sexual expression or authentic sexual expression. But I guess what I want to say is, you know, everybody's expression, much like everybody's personal style, is going to be different. And the sooner that we begin to actually learn and understand the truth of our bodies, the truth of our authentic sexual expression, the truth of what we need, what we desire, what our boundaries are, what we actually want when it comes to sex, the the better our sex life is going to be. And the more we understand that, the less we're kind of like pushed and pulled in these different directions of trying to contort ourselves to fit in a box. And everybody's sexual expression is going to look deeply different to the next person, and that's a beautiful thing, and that's okay. um, I think it's just there's this huge unlearning that often has to happen surrounding us all being different when it comes to sex, because oftentimes, you know, we, like you said, we've been shown this very narrow view of what sex is, how desire should work, how we should I hate the word
I
should when
know.
it comes to sex. I hate the word should. But it's that, you know, demonstration of how we should be showing up. And this unlearning of those narratives is so important, so we can actually have the kind of sex that we want to have and have the relationships that we want to have that are going to be deeply unique to us.
Ollie, I love that. And I think you've touched on two really good points. One of them, the word should. I feel like, especially in the midst of our 30s, there's so many shoulds, so many expectations, and I guess invisible standards that you think you should be meeting. And something
Mm.
that I've spoken about in the podcast before, and I guess it takes us a bit more into a bit of a manifesting and intentional living, is that unblocking of those conditionings and those limiting beliefs that make you think of all these shoulds, but constantly drift you away from that authentic path. I guess as someone who is still tapping into that authentic path and what that looks like. Once you start unblocking and diving into that in whatever area of life, I feel like there's so much magnetism and abundance and fulfillment that you can get. And this is beyond sex, it's just in general in life. But unfortunately, again, I don't think we're given the space for that to happen. And more, especially with the internet world becoming so loud, it's almost like you have to look a certain way, you have to talk a certain way. There's all these things building up. And yeah, tapping into that authentic code is even harder. But it's, again, we just need to reinforce that message that if you actually just listen within, you do have the answers. And I feel like it's so powerful to be able to do that, especially in your sex life. Like, you'll be very, very happy if you're able to do that and step away from those conditionings and, yeah, parameters that are set for you.
And something I want to add to that is like, this is a messy process as well. And I think one of the reasons that it can be so scary to explore the, our authentic expression in whatever facet of our life is that it can be messy and we make mistakes and there isn't a huge amount of room when we look at this super image based society that we've created. And social media is all about image and everyone being perfect and getting it right. There's not a huge amount of room for mess. And I want to say, like this process of understanding our authentic expression and that authentic sexual coding that we all have, it is going to require us like exploring and making a bit of a mess sometimes. It will involve, I promise you, it will not be easeful all the time. It just won't. It's like there's going to be, it requires a level of exploration and courage and bravery to do new things, to feel different parts of yourself, to allow different parts of yourself to come through and to come up and express. And I think this applies to all areas of our lives, but I'll just speak to sex specifically. It will require us likely getting hurt in the process, perhaps hurting other people's feelings in the process, learning from those things, experiencing things that we're like, oh, actually, that really wasn't for me. And then also experiencing things that you're like, oh my God, this is incredible and I love this. And it's all of these experiences that we're going to have. It requires an opening from us to be open to the good, the bad, the ugly, the messy, and being aware that even in the challenging experiences there's lessons and learnings there, and that's so important. And as we're starting to experience and come into contact with these authentic parts of ourselves and our authentic sexual expression, like it's not going to be a perfect easeful process. It's going to be a bit of a shit show sometimes,
I
and that's
love that.
okay. and
Fully.
and let it be. Let yourself, and that's not to enable hurting people on purpose or behaving in a hurtful way, but it's just to like give you a little bit of grace of like, you're a human and it's okay for life to be a little bit, for you to make a little mess as you learn as well.
Absolutely. Great reminder for sure. Life, if anything, is messy. And the earlier we accept that, like, the ebbs and flows are always going to be coming our way. So it's so important to, yeah, I guess, surrender to that idea and step away from a perfection and standard that we mentally create. And this is how things should be. But it's more like, this is how it is today, might look different tomorrow. This is how we're, learning. And yeah, I feel like that's just the process of life at the end of the day. From experience in your practice, what would you say for someone, for example, that's single at the moment? And obviously, there's that level of embodiment that needs to happen before, and that tapping in with your body. When you're starting to face dating again, what would you say are good things to keep in mind that tap into that, I guess, surrender mindset where you allow that exploration? Because I feel like that's something that's really daunting in the dating space when you think, okay, there might be a potential sexual experience with this person. There's maybe that performance mind kind of stepping in and creeping in, ways in which we can like just allow the exploration and even communicate it, because I feel like especially in sex, communication is lacking and so hard to get the words out. Like, just a few tips on how that could be done with a bit more ease.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this question. So I think one of the biggest tools, or one of the most powerful tools that we can use when we're dating and we're dating someone new and perhaps it's leading towards having sex with this person, is slowness. And I think it is so undervalued in dating, is giving yourself permission to take as much time as you need to get to know someone so you actually feel safe and comfortable to be able to communicate your needs, your desires, your boundaries, whatever it is you're needing to communicate. And not feeling as though there is like an urgency to dating. I think what can often happen when we're dating is there's this like almost scarcity piece that comes up, and there's this urgency of like, oh my god, well, we've been on one date and then we need to have sex and we need to, and that's like this like almost our nervous system is just like fucking firing. And learning how to actually center ourselves and take things slower. And I think slowness is really underutilized in dating, because when we move slowly, we give ourselves time to actually feel what's true. When we move quickly, we can really override what's actually happening in our body. When we move slowly, we build anticipation. When we move slowly, we give ourselves the opportunity to actually get to know someone and their intentions, and we're able to understand what our intentions are. And this is not me saying wait 3 dates to sleep with someone. What it is saying is to let your body, like, give yourself enough time for your body and your brain to communicate with each other and to catch up with each other.
Mhm.
And I think when we give ourselves slowness, like when we provide slowness to the dating experience, it enables more presence, because we're not constantly thinking about what's happening next. It's not like, okay, we're on this date right now and I'm actually already 14 steps ahead back at their place this evening, back at his place, and I'm already thinking about like how we're gonna have sex. It's like, actually, I'm just here, and we're just gonna let myself move slowly through this experience, and I'm just gonna be right here. I'm gonna have this conversation, and I'm just gonna stay present. And when we give ourselves permission to move slowly, that is not to say that you might move slowly through a date and then you get to the end of the date and you're really feeling that person and you're like, yeah, beautiful, let's go home together. That feels great for me. But it's just giving yourself permission to move at your own pace. And I think the pace that we often move at is too quickly for our brain and body to be communicating in a way that is actually like conducive to creating great experiences. So that would be my big tip. My other tip is to be really fucking clear on your standards. Like, be so clear on what your standards are and the way that you desire to be treated. And this is not to say that you don't give people chances and that, you be so rigid in your standards, and like someone says one word wrong and you're like, I'm out, that's my standards. It's not to say to be closed with your standards, but it is to say, if you've been speaking to someone, for 2 weeks and they're being deeply inconsistent, they will not lock down a date. Like, they're just essentially being a fucking time waster. Like, being so clear on your standards of like, oh, I'm actually not available for this. I want consistency. I want, whatever it is that your standards are. Perhaps your standards are, I don't want emotional intimacy with someone, and I actually require a relationship that's really like minimal communication, and we need to be on the same page about that. So whatever it is, just being crystal clear within yourself about what you're looking for, so you can A, communicate that, and B, like cultivate that in whatever phase of dating that you're in. Those would be my 2 tips.
Very powerful tips, I must say, because one of the things that was coming to mind was often, as someone who has been in a long term relationship and not as much single in my late 20s and 30s, and hearing from experiences from just people around me, there's almost like you give away your standards and your belief system in order to receive love and desire and affection and sexual intimacy and things like that, because obviously they are things that we long for as humans. But often sticking to those boundaries and sticking to those things that you're like, this is actually what I value and what I don't want to let go of, is really hard too, because again, you long for that desire and that loving relationship in your life. So I guess it's a powerful message at the end of the day, because unfortunately in the dating scene we do find that in any of the genders, there's ghosting, there's gaslighting, there's a lot of these things happening. But again, it's that tapping in of, if this is not really feeling right, don't make up for it. Don't make excuses for it, because your body at the end of the day, it's signaling those things.
Mm, absolutely. And I think, what you're sharing as well, I think it's really important when we're dating to be aware about how attachment and our attachment styles work. Because I can hear in what you've just shared, it's like there was, for a lot of people in early stage dating, our attachment styles become blaringly fucking obvious. And I think really getting familiar with and healing your attachment styles, like dating is such a great place to experience yourself and to actually experience all of the things in you that you didn't, that maybe you thought you'd healed, that you thought you'd worked on. And really, I love what you said surrounding, like being super clear on who you are and not overcompensating for other people. And I think that really comes into effect when we develop secure attachment within ourselves and we're like, actually, you know, this is who I am. I'm really comfortable in who I am. I have a life and I have friendships and I have, responsibilities and things that I have to keep in check in my life. And it's like, should I be dating and meeting someone? It's like, someone is coming into my life and I'm going into their life. And it's like two lives coming together to sort of go almost in a parallel, rather than you dropping everything in order to kind of fuse yourself into someone else's life. That's very anxious attachment to do that.
Fully.
um, but,
And no
I
judgment,
think,
but yes, it's very anxious.
oh, hey,
Yeah.
that's been me before. So please, there's no judgment at all.
Absolutely.
But I think, I think it's really important to be aware in dating how our attachment styles are playing out. I think it's actually a huge key to dating well and dating in a conscious way. You know, I think we can really wreak havoc in our lives and in other people's lives when we are not aware of these patterns and these things. So I think it's a really, I think it's a really important part of dating. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Just to add to what you
Yeah.
said.
Absolutely. And I think very often for people who are not, they're not psychologists, they're not mental health workers or sexologists, you learn this through practice. That is the messiness
Yeah.
of dating. And I think also the older we get, these things become more apparent and more aware. I think it's just
Mm.
embracing those things in life, those seasons as they come. And obviously there can be a lot of pain, there can be a lot of sadness throughout that. But it's just a reminder that at the end of the day, that is dating. There's such an expectation that, I guess, movies and things like that, the expectation of, I'm gonna meet someone and we're gonna have this passionate link immediately. It's like he's going to be the one, in this case, in a heterosexual relationship or dynamic. And that's not realistic. If anything, our sexual energy needs that safe space. And I'm just going to say that firsthand. I have witnessed the change of going from relationships where I was in that my anxious attachment was really heightened. And then
Mm.
when I finally found myself feeling safe with someone, the magnetism and the abundance that can come from that relationship as a whole is a complete game changer. I guess it brings me back to something you were mentioning at the beginning with libido, and how we obviously can go through seasons where, like, hormonally our body might be different, mentally our body might be different, seasonally in general, there might be external things happening. I guess scientifically and holistically, how can we better understand our libido, especially as women in our 30s?
Absolutely. Such a good question. Such a necessary
Mm,
question for women to understand. So, our libido, our sexual desire, is ultimately there are biological, like there's biopsychosocial factors that influence it. So biological, psychological, and social factors that influence it. So things like our mental and emotional landscape has a huge impact on our libido. Things like stress, pressure, how much how much we're juggling in our life, all of these things, socially, like, you know are we are we surrounded by people we care and adore? Are we feeling lonely? Like what's happening in the fucking political climate right now? Like there's just so many things that influence our our libido. And this season, is it winter? I don't know. I'm nowhere near as horny in winter as I am in summer. Summer, it's like the sun's out and my skin's out and I'm warm and it's great. In winter, I feel like a little bear in hibernation.
Mhm.
And over the course of our cycle, biologically, like our menstrual cycle, our hormones, these are all things that are hugely impactful on our sexual desire. And I think something that I really want every woman to know is your libido and changes in your libido, does not mean that it's broken. If you've, say, had a really high libido and really high sexual desire, and then suddenly it's shifted, that's not your libido breaking. And people go, oh my gosh, I feel broken, I feel as though there's something wrong with me. When our libido shifts and changes, it is actually doing exactly what it is designed to do, because it is signaling to you that something in your environment, in your body, on your heart, in your head, that something is out of balance and out of alignment. Whether it is your relationship, whether it's where you're living, whether it's the fact that you need to go and get some vitamin D and lay in the sun for for 10 minutes, or what you need to be eating better, or you need to be nourishing your body more, or de-stressing, or whatever the thing is. When your libido shifts and changes, it is signaling to you that there is something shifting and changing within your head, your heart, your body, your environment. And your libido, something I also want to reiterate is that I think our body is highly intelligent, and there are moments in our life. I know for me, when my dad died, there was this huge drop in my libido naturally, because I was grieving, and the intelligence of my body to go, oh, actually, we're going to suppress your libido because you need to heal and you need this time to grieve and you need to just sit and be in this place. Like that's deep intelligence from our body. And I think what often happens is we want to we become frustrated with a lower libido and or shifts and changes in our libido, rather than communing with our body and going, oh, okay, what intelligence has this come from? What are you trying to communicate to me? How can I actually come into connection with my body and understand what's happening around me? And do I perhaps need to actually just sit and be with this thing that's there and let it move through me? And maybe it's an emotional thing, and maybe it's like, okay, maybe I need to just feel some feelings today. And then things start to shift and change, or maybe I need to eat breakfast before my coffee, or whatever the thing is. Really seeing shifts and changes in our libido as our body's intelligence. The other thing I will say, with our sexual desire, it can often be confused for, like, our having a low libido can be confused for also just not desiring shitty, mediocre sex.
Mhm.
If we're not having the kind of sex that we want to be having, if we're not having sex that feels good and that feels safe and pleasurable and turns us on, pretty natural to not be desiring it. There's nothing wrong with you there. And I think it's really important to be an inquiry about, if we are noticing big shifts and changes in our libido, like just to be curious about what it could be, rather than labeling it as something that's wrong.
Mhm.
And the other thing I want to say about our sexual desire is there's two sort of types of desire. We have spontaneous desire, which is where we desire sex with very little sexual stimuli. So that's, you're literally walking down the street and you sort of just have like a memory flashback about this time that this guy was going down on you and it was really hot and sexy. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm wet. I'm ready to go. And that's spontaneous desire. And for a lot of women, that's not a very relatable experience of having that spontaneous desire like that. Because for the vast majority of women, we experience responsive desire. So responsive desire is where we start desiring sex after we've begun to receive stimuli. So it's like it requires a lot more sexual stimuli, and we start to desire it as we are now like receiving that. So what that can look like is, oh, I don't actually feel like having sex, but then your partner or your lover starts like massaging your body and kind of like rubbing your hips and rubbing your shoulders, and like you start kind of breathing and you're like, oh, actually no, I do desire sex, actually I am desiring it, but it just requires that warming up to occur first. And so, again, a lot of women really confuse having a low libido with their responsive desire. So, I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind too, of like exploring how sexual desire actually works for you. Are you someone who experiences spontaneous desire, or do you require that effort and that kind of, a little bit more sexual stimuli in order to actually feel turned on? So, I think keeping those pieces in mind is really important when we discuss and explore libido and how it works for us.
I'd actually never come across those two terms that you just explained, but I find it really interesting actually. And based off a post that you did recently, where I guess as women, especially, and again, this is the audience that we're talking to, the way our body responds to sexual energy is so different to male, right? And our anatomy works so different. And I guess in many cases, obviously, in every relationship where there's two people involved, in a monogamous relationship, the libido in each end is obviously going to be fluctuating, and there might be one that's more heightened and one that's a bit lower. But I guess when you come to that safe middle ground of, okay, I can see where we both stand, right? And learning how a woman's body responds to that responsive initiation is so important. And I guess many of us don't allow for that to happen still, because it feels like it's going to be too long. I guess there's that, I don't know, in a way, a bit more of a patriarchal system defined there,
Mm.
where
Mm-hmm.
we're not allowing ourselves to fully go into that full exploration mode because of how long
Mm-hmm.
things could take. What would you say
Yeah.
in that regard?
Yeah. So I think I really love this question, and I really resonate with this question because, it's a lot to override what we have been taught as girls and as women, that being that sex is actually not for us, sex is for the pleasure of men. And that's the narrative that we have both been directly and indirectly told throughout our lives.
Mhm.
The way sex is portrayed, and still very much portrayed, things are changing, but sex is portrayed through a very male focused lens. And that teaches women that, oh, sex and pleasure isn't actually for us. I'm here to serve the man, obviously, heterosexually speaking. So, overriding this narrative, in order for us to actually start having sexual experiences that work for us, it feels like a lot. And it can feel really vulnerable to learn how to ask for what we need. Can feel so vulnerable to override this narrative and to go against this narrative of like, oh, this thing is actually for me, and I am actually worthy of pleasure, and actually my needs are important. It feels fucking vulnerable, because when you've been told something both directly and indirectly your whole life, to go against that feels really quite jarring on
Mhm.
one's system. So I think, it's really important for us to be choosing partners who prioritize our pleasure and who are open to having these conversations, and who we can safely communicate and have these conversations with. Because even if, and I will say as well, even if our partners are really beautiful, kind, open people, they have also indirectly and directly been receiving the exact same message as us. So there's going to be a level of communing that has to happen, and co-creation that has to happen when you have conversations, right? So there's going to be a level of relearning for them too. But what I will say is, our pleasure is ultimately, at the end of the day, it is our responsibility. And that is not to say that not experiencing pleasure is your fault by any means, but it is to say, our pleasure is our responsibility, and it is up to us to find the courage to have these conversations. It is up to us to learn how to commune with our nervous system, so we can receive in pleasure. It's up to us to build safety within our body, so we can learn how to receive our partners and receive in experiences. And I think something that I get frustrated with in kind of modern therapy talk and modern, you know, through all of the therapy language that gets thrown around, is oftentimes there's a lack of empowerment and a level of responsibility that almost becomes separate to people. And it's like, well, you know, there's this whole narrative that's happened and it's not actually my fault. And, you know, too bad, you know, yeah, I've been directly and indirectly told my whole life that pleasure's not for me. And that's why I'm like this. And it's like, yes. And that's a really challenging thing. And it is still your responsibility to work through that. And I think that's a really important piece that I really empower my clients to look into is like, yes, you know, we have had these things that are out of our control. However, what is in our control is learning how to experience pleasure, how to reclaim our pleasure, how to heal. And that oftentimes requires a level of courage, a level of bravery, and a level of deep self responsibility. And when we choose partners who are open to walking that path with us, it becomes so much easier because you're doing it together. And I think, you know, there can be often, like I mentioned before, that expectation that our partners should just know and that our partners should be leading in these areas. And I think when it comes to our pleasure, it really is our responsibility to be communicating honestly and authentically about what we need because our partners cannot read our minds. And I think, you know, if we look in like same sex relationships for women, I think there's a level of mind reading that does happen a little bit more when two women are coming together or two female bodied people are coming together because you experience pleasure in a far more similar way. In heterosexual dynamics, men have no fucking clue about how a woman's body works. And I don't say that in any way that's like derogatory or like putting them down, but they do not have our body. And for them, the way arousal works is they get an erection. Arousal is instantaneous. They often experience spontaneous desire a lot more than what we do as women. It's just this completely opposite experience. And that's not to say there aren't men out there who have spent lots of time really understanding female pleasure and arousal and like beautiful, gorgeous. But it is to say that for the vast majority of men, they are projecting their experience of pleasure and arousal onto women. And we see that when, you know, we're making out with a guy and he just like goes straight for the genitals. And you're like, I am not there. I am like 400 steps behind that right now. And he's like, no, but I want you to touch my cock. Like that's what I want right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that's that projection of where things are at and how arousal and pleasure works for men and women so differently. And so really communicating, you know, what you're needing. So, and this really, you know, falls back onto understanding your needs, your desires, your boundaries, and getting really confident in communicating those.
Yes, yes to everything. I guess all along I'm thinking in the work of unblocking in general, you know, there's a lot of chat now about your inner child and tapping into that childlike behavior. It's almost like if we strip away performance
Mm,
and we behave more like children would, where we're
mm,
exploring,
mm,
that is so beautiful in itself. And obviously, you do need to find that safety within the other person, which is not that accessible. Let's say we all need to be kind of like simultaneously in that frame of mind. But if someone has will, then there's hope, right? And,
mm.
you know, when you were talking about the different ways that our bodies work, it reminded me of that book, Women Are From Venus, Men Are From Mars.
Yeah.
It's a great one to keep in mind, just that title, that heading, because we are. And so often, again, talking about that monogamous heterosexual dynamic, we do expect the man to read our mind. It's so important to reinforce the power of communication. I think it's such a easily undermined tool that we all have access to. And again, thinking of the way we might have seen, you know, older generations get married and go through life, we're still reframing what that looks like now. A level of empowerment, of confidence, of accountability, of self love that as women we're starting to cultivate and bring into that relationship is obviously having a huge shift on these dynamics that men are also trying to keep up and learn about. So so much to come out of that. But I think the overall message of that messiness, of that playfulness, of that curiosity is so empowering. At least just having this chat with you, I'm like,
Mm.
yes, 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 all of this needs to come into play. As someone who is single at 34, great reminders all along where I'm like, it doesn't have to be that hard. Things don't have to be as hard as we make them in our minds, and just bringing that energy all along just sounds, yeah, really exciting.
Beautiful. And I think like something I want to say as well is, yeah, I love what you shared about, bringing that curiosity and that almost like childlike wonder into our sexual experiences and our relationships and dating. And I think it really does translate so beautifully because, um, sex and dating and relating, I said this before with the messiness piece, it's like, it is. It's like it doesn't have to be this perfect constructed thing. Like it actually can be this place where we explore and are curious and try things. And particularly, and I want to say like particularly when we're single and dating, it's such a playground. It can be such a playground in that we can try different aspects of ourselves out. We can, different people are going to bring out different parts of our sexual essence and our sexual expression. And that's such a beautiful thing to be open to. And when we become really rigid in it's like almost like super rigid in those, not so much the standards, but like what we think we want and how things should be. That's when we start to block ourselves and almost like double down on those blockages of like, what like of what we can experience and what's available to us. And so I think, if you are someone who's in that phase of sexual exploration, like just being open, moving slowly and being open to everything that's available to you in the present moment, and not necessarily shutting something down because you don't think you should. It's like, actually, is this something that I'm curious about, and really tapping into that curiosity and exploration and play. And, I think as well, when it comes to sex specifically, there's a level of seriousness that people project onto sex. And like, sex does not have to be this super serious, super intense thing all the time. It's like I encourage people to have fun. Like, there's going to be moments. Sex can be awkward. Sex can be weird. There can be weird sounds and smells and experiences and things that happen because we're humans and that's what our body does. And there needs to be a level of acceptance, and almost in that play comes a level of maturity as well. When we start to really mature, I think that's when we become more open to sex being a bit weird and messy and
Hmm.
strange. And yeah, I actually see it as almost like an immature thing when we expect that perfection in sex, because it's like it's that almost teenage mindset of like it needs to look like a movie. And I think as we start to mature and grow, there's a level of acceptance of the weird and wonderful. Mm.
So in with the weird, in with the slow, out with the performance. I love that.
Yes.
This is the year of the weird and the slowness.
I love that. I think I think the weird as well is like the authentic. All right. It's
It
like it's just
is.
the authentic. And the when we expect perfection and try to cultivate perfection in our sex life, it is exhausting and it's inauthentic. And when we can lean into the kind of kooky, weird, authentic parts of ourselves, we become more relaxed. And when we're more relaxed in sex, the safer we feel, the more safety we can cultivate, the more open we can be, the more connection we have access to, the more intimacy we have access to. So I think, yeah, out with the perfection and the performance and in with the authenticity. Yeah.
I love that. I've got one very last question before we wrap up today. And just
Yeah.
because we're in kind of like that, I guess, transition phase in the year, right? 2026 has just begun. The year of the snake, most of us have heard of it, and how we're kind of starting a new energy very soon in February. What would you say on a personal level is something you're inviting for yourself in this next year ahead?
I love that. That's such a beautiful question, and one that I've thought about a lot this year. I had 3 words for my year, but I'll share this one because it feels relevant. For me, love. I'm calling in love. I've had a beautiful year of really shedding all of the parts of me last year that were kind of not even shedding the single parts, but I just really had a year where I like lent into my solo time, and this year I feel like I'm really calling in like a really aligned, beautiful partnership and love, falling in love
Oh,
again.
I
I'm
love
really,
that.
really open to that. Yeah. And I feel the energy of the fire horse is like, go after it, you know? It feels like such a powerful year for that.
Mhm.
So
I love
that's
that for
me.
you. I can see that happening. That sounds wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time. This has been such a great chat. I've loved every second of it. And I'll make sure to tag your profile on the show notes. And if there's anything else you'd like to add, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, yeah, we'll stay connected.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure. And yeah, I hope that everyone listening got some beautiful little gems out of this conversation. It's been so much fun.